Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be making the Royal Warden, the Crypthralls, the Canoptek Reanimator, Scarabs, and Warriors from the Indomitus box set. Now, there is a lot here. These are just the guys that don't have the shiny swords. Now we're basically going to start off by clipping them off their sprues, and we're going to remove all the extra flash and all the extra lines with a razor blade and a very fine sand file for any specific issues. And once that is done, we will end up just gluing everything together. Now, I used super glue. I don't recommend that because you have to push all these things through. Like, assembly is a little difficult, so plastic glue is better because these models are very thin and brittle, so you could accidentally break them, and super glue will seal on contact and you have to push some things together, and these models are too thin and frail for that. So don't use super glue, use regular model glue for that. And with that done, what we're going to do is we're going to now begin priming. Now, using some masking tape and my usual Bright Touch general purpose car primer, I'm going to prime everything. I'm going to use the tape, and I'm going to double tape it on the side and attach all the models onto it, and then just prime it. I'm going to spray from 4 different directions. Now, while the models are drying from having one of their sides painted or primed, I'm going to show off this. So for the bases, I've discovered that there are these rolling pins you can buy from Green Stuff World. I got mine off eBay, and they have this really nice texture pattern in it, and there's tons of different types. And there's one for Necrons. They call it Necronic to avoid getting the cease and desist from GW. But it's $23, but it comes from Spain, so it took like 2 to 3 weeks to actually get here. So this is actually a really nice little kit thing. It's pretty helpful, so I'm going to finally test it out. So now I'm going to go to my GoTech Liquitex modeling paste, and so with that I'm going to put a thick layer on, and then afterwards, once I get it, I'm going to smooth it with a popsicle stick to get it smooth. That's the one issue with this, because it's very sticky and tacky. Getting it smooth is going to be an issue. And so once I have that done, I'm then going to take a hair dryer, and then I'm going to rapidly dry the top. It's still soft, but the top is moldable. You can press it, touch it, and it won't have an issue. So once I dry it off, I then take a box from another model kit, and I just press on top, and I just lightly tap to make sure it's flat enough. Alright, here we go. And that kind of didn't turn out well. Well, that's disappointing. Moving on. By this time, all the models have now finished drying, so I'm going to take them off, I'm going to re-put the tape on and flip them over to their other side and just arrange them for priming. Now, while that side is drying, I'm going to try using green stuff. So I'm going to do a 1-to-1 of blue and green, or blue and yellow, and we're going to mix it, and we're going to prepare for, the base. So it's going to take a lot of green putty actually to cover the base. I'm going to use it on the largest base because, well, why not? So this is night and day easier to smooth out. I mean, there are little holes here and there, but that's not an issue. Alright, after applying a bunch of water and punching in holes for where the model's legs go through, I'm going to do it. And mixed results. So the green stuff is really tough and hard, so I have to use a lot of pressure, but it's so much pressure that this base is so big that the center of the base is pushed in, and the die, essentially the rolling pin, doesn't go deep into the center, so the center looks like it doesn't have a good imprint, but the edges do. So looks like green stuff is out. Too tough, but it does stick to the base very well. Well, alright then, all the models are done. We then organize them and put them into small different piles. Now we're going to use Iron Breaker, which has been the go-to base layer for this entire box set for me. And we're going to coat everything in Iron Breaker. Now, I first start off with an airbrush because there's so much. Don't use it. The metallics don't really go too well through the airbrush, and some places are painted, some places just are not. It's like the paint comes apart in the airbrush, this metallic, so use a brush. It's much better. And now with Black Templar Contrast Paint, Ironbreaker, Contrast Paint Golem and Flesh, Technical Contrast Medium, and Contrast Paint Skeleton Horde, we're going to paint pretty much all the Necrons this. This is kind of I mean, they all look the same. What can you say? So we're going to start off with the Scarabs as a test piece. I'm going to put the underside all Black Templar Contrast as a black. Once the core, insides, undersides, and the arms of the Scarabs are done, we're going to do a 2 parts Golem and Flesh to 1 part Technical Contrast Medium, and we're going to paint all the metal body, the major chunk of the body. For some odd reason, I forgot to include it before, but I also use Agrax Earthshade, so the parts that are not the main body, like the heads, faces, shoulders and stuff, we're going to put a layer of Agrax Earthshade onto the models. So I'm painting the heads here Agrax Earthshade. Once the whole body and head is painted, I then go with Ironbreaker and I'm going to dry brush. I'm going to dry brush this all over the armor, the head, and the arms. Do a light dry brush, we don't want it to be heavy. And then with Pure Skeleton Horde Contrast, we're going to coat the body with this. And once that's done, we're going to go back to the 2 parts Guilliman and 1 part Technical, and we're just going to apply this to like the edges of the Scarab bodies. Alright, after the first time I've been to the GW store in a long time, picking up some Technical Tesseract Glow, Moot Green, and Pallid Witch Flesh, we're going to do the glowing green stuff. So I'm going to start off first with Tesseract Glow. I'm going to coat the orb and the little dot eyes with this. And I'm also going to like spread it to the nearby metal, the ring of metal around it. And then once that's done, I'm going to take pure Moot Green and then paint the entire orbs and eyes this color. Make sure you have very fine brushes for this. I had to alternate between 2 brushes to get this right. And now with maybe 2 parts Moot to 1 part Pallid or 1 to 1, I'm not sure of the ratio, but I mixed it in until I got a color that was slightly a little lighter than the pure Moot Green. And then I just covered the entirety of the eyes and orb thing with this. And then adding some more Pallid Witch Flesh into the mix until it was even lighter, I then make sure it's watered down. I then applied this to, I'd say maybe less than half of the orb or eye, towards the light or towards the raised areas is as best as I can explain it. So here's a picture of the mixes essentially. The white is the pure Pallid Witch Flesh, and these are the 3 colors. The third color on the right, not that dot of green on the right, that's the Tesseract Glow, but that third color there is the pure Moot, and you can see the transition between the different colors and layers there. And you want to carefully make sure the next layer is just a bit brighter, not too much or it's going to be too much of a strong contrast. You need to build up the layer, so I decided to use 3. Very simple. I wasn't going to use pure Pallid Witch Flesh. So this is a basic example of what I use, and I use this as my standard template of color for the green. Alright, moving on to the Crypthralls. I use the box art as the guide for how these are going to be painted. More on why I chose to not be original later. But the internal parts, his joints, stuff like that, we're going to paint Black Templar. And we want them, well, this basic black color that's based off the box. Since we're basically using a bunch of thin washes and layers and such, we're going to go back with Ironbreaker and we're going to patch up and fix places where the Black Templar spilled out or touched. And now with pure Agrax Earthshade, we're going to coat the main chest piece, back piece, as best as I can think, the large chunk of armor plate on him. And we're going to give that to him and the small round thingy. And then once that is done, we're also going to then go and do our 2 parts Golem to 1 part Technical, and then we're going to apply it to their arms, their legs and stuff as the base layer, and like some parts into the body. And once that's done, I'm going to use Ironbreaker Dry Brush. Make sure you have a very good brush for dry brushing. It makes all the difference. And we're going to dry brush the entire thing, the joints, the metal, the inner parts, as best we can with a light dry brush. And now with Skeleton Horde Contrast, we're going to paint the arms, the legs, wherever you put the golem and flesh. But we will also paint this on like the crest, the ridges, and like the lower half of the chest pieces and armor. This is where you get to have fun and add like flavor to it. Have a good brush for this because you want like feathery strokes on it so that the transition between the brighter metal and this darker metal looks nicer. And then we're going back to our 2-to-1 Guilliman and Technical Contrast, and then we're going to apply it on like, not the center pieces, but like the edges of each of the arm, leg pieces and such, and as well as the crests on top of the armor and stuff in other areas. Use it where you like. We're also applying it to the feet. This is to add color, and also use it on like their chins, as best as I can think, the underside of their chins. I think I overdid it on this round wheelie thingy, I don't know what it is, so I dry brushed again onto his armor plate just to even him out. And now with Tesseract Glow, we're going to use this to cover the orbs, eyes, stuff like that. It's okay if a little bit spills over to the surrounding areas, but we don't want to like completely fill in the gap. This is to be a base layer, it's also to show glow, so lightly touching the surrounding area. And now with pure Moot Green, we're just going to cover the entirety of the orbs. We don't want to touch the parts where it's supposed to be glowing, so be careful with that. Just cover the entirety of the orbs. And now, after adding a little bit of Pallid Witch Flesh to it, making it a little brighter, we're going to paint like 80 to 90% of the orb. We just want the pure Moot Green to be in the darker recesses and such, or the edges of the orb. And then with the very bright version of Pallid Witch Flesh mixed with Moot Green, we're going to apply it to like 60 to 40% of the orbs, the eyes, or the most raised, or in the case of the wheelie thing, the part of the orb that is closest to the outside. I don't know how to describe that, but alright, and done. 2 Crypthralls and whatever this round thingy is. I'm going to do the destroyed bases later for these. And now we're going to paint the Royal Warden. We're going to start with Black Templar contrast paint, and we're going to paint his innards, his joints and stuff. We're also going to paint his gun and the rock he's standing on. So what it's going to look like is that the base is going to be a black stone, and he's standing on a rock of black stone. So, Black Templar covering the gun and everything else. We then proceed to clean up all the silver pieces that we may have blotched on. Since we're using very thin coats and washes for our painting, if the black is in the wrong spot, it's really going to show through and kind of ruin it. And then using Agrek's Earthshade, we're going to take it and we're going to apply it to his chest piece, shoulders, his gun barrel, or the tips of his gun, the bayonet, and some coils. We then do our usual 2-to-1 Guilliman and technical contrast paint all over his arms, his legs, and such and such. Also, I forgot to mention, we put Agrek's Earthshade on that weird cloak of his. And once these base colors are done, we dry brush Ironbreaker all over the model, including the gun, but we want to do it lightly on the gun. I think I did a little too much on the gun, but what can you do? Then moving on with Skeleton Horde Contrast, we're going to coat his cloak with it, his metal cloak thingy, as well as the end of his gun, his bayonet, his arms, his legs, and parts of his main, his chest and stuff to add color, mostly on like his ridges and stuff. This is where you get to have a little fun with his armor. And back to Tesseract Glow. We then take it and apply it to the orbs on his gun as well as the rim of metal that's around the orbs. Once that's done, we're going to take Moot Green and we're going to fill in the orbs completely. Once that is done, we're going to go and do our, like, I don't know, 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 Moot Green and Pallid Witch Flesh and coat the orbs entirely in it. And then we're going to take our 1-to-1 or 1 to 2 parts moot to pallid, and then just do it on the upper, say 60 to 40% of each of the orbs. I then shore up a few of the details on his chest and other stuff with Iron Breaker, since it's just basic metal here. And now moving on to the Canoptek Reanimator. We're going to do most of his main joints, tubes, a lot of his inner parts with Black Templar as a base. After coating everything with Black Templar, we then go back and we fix up things with Iron Break. And then with our 2-to-1 Gulliment Technical Contrast Medium, we then coat all of his legs, his arms, and such with this paint. We then use Agrex Earthshade to coat the giant metal plate that is on him, as well as some coils. Once that is done, we dry brush the entire model. Also, his faceplate is coated in Agrex Earthshade as well. Then, based off the box art, we're actually going to take and put 2 total layers of Agrex Earthshade onto his feet and his little mandibles there. They're a darker metal. And so we're going to apply a layer of Agrex Earthshade. We're then going to take our Skeleton Horde contrast and apply it to the edges of these armor plates and stuff, to the crest and ridges, parts of the face, around the edges, and as well as the legs or the arm, whichever we want to say it, the main body, wherever we put the Gulliment flesh. And then we take our Gulliment and contrast medium mix, and we're going to apply it to each of these like arm pieces or chunks. We're going to apply it to the edges, not the center, and to its armor plates and stuff. Or you just feel for where you want it. This is not exactly a precise science. We want it on the edges, towards the outer ends. You can have fun with it here. This is just slathering on paint. And then we're going to move on to the glow and the eyes. So we're going to start off by doing a base layer of the Tesseract glow. We can let it spill to the surrounding area. Now, as far as the eye sockets, if there's a dark ring of dark there, we don't want to like flood it. We only want the orb and like the edges of the metal around there. We still want to see that dark ring around the eye. And once that is done, fill the entirety of the eye and the orbs in moot green. Then using the Pallid Wish Flesh moot green mix, the first one, we're going to paint all the, as far as the orbs, like 80 to 90% of the orb. As far as the eyes, like maybe 80 to 70% of the eye, the upper raised area. And as far as the giant orb in the center, the parts that are closer to the outside. And as far as these hoses, the center areas, or like the loops. We don't want to paint the edges. The edges should be dark. The center should be lighter. And then with the lightest mix and the most Pallid Witch Flesh, the lightest green color we mix, we're going to cover the orbs with like maybe 70 to 80% of the green. The hoses, the center are going to be filled up. The eye, like the upper 60% is going to be coated in this. Make sure it's thinned down with a little bit of water so it flows well. And yeah. And so I fixed the orbs a little bit off camera. It's a little hard to paint it all under the camera, but afterwards I like fixed up the orbs just a little bit with this extra paint. And now onto the warriors. Guess what we're doing? Black Templar on their center chest piece, their joints, their gun, even their toes actually. And now we're going to take a break from that and show off. It's been a few days in real time, and essentially I got some milliput because I heard it recommended with the dies that I got, the rolling pin dies, and I got some filler because milliput is expensive and there's just too much to go around. And so I'm going to take this Bon Jovi hardening clay, or plaster, whatever thingy, and I'm going to mix it. So I'm going to do an experiment of two experiments, 1-to-1 milliput and this Bon Jovi drying clay, and a 1-to-2 part milliput to clay. And so I mixed them together to see how they would hold, and they're not smooth, but they crack a bit. And so with the 1-to-1 I try applying it, and then I trim off the edges, and then I place the scarab on it. The lighter one is the one with less milliput. The darker one is the one with more milliput. How do I put this? They're not smooth. They're cracked, obviously. They look kind of meh. But it is a cheaper alternative, and they kind of do work. But this looks like it's going to be better for like some sand or desert kind of stuff, or cracked earth. Going back to the Necron Warriors, I have applied the 2-to-1 Gulliman and Technical, and then I applied the Agrax Earthshade to the head and to the chest piece and shoulders and such and such. I also applied the Agrax to the end of the gun barrel and the bayonet axe head thingy. And did a dry brush all over the model. And then applied Skeleton Horde contrast on the arms and the legs and the ridges of his back, parts of his chest and such, his cheeks, for those that did have cheeks, and some of the metal coil. I then went back and then applied the 2-to-1 mix of Gulliman to Technical all over again on the tops of his palms, the edges of his arms and legs stuff. We don't want it to completely cover it, we just want it to like be on the edge of each of his arm and leg pieces, and his feet. And then for the gun, which I use Tesseract Glow for, I found the technique the best way to do it fast is just to paint just straight down in a line. It'll hit all the edges and such, and it'll fill in the center. Easy, done. But I have to get a thinner brush to do the eyes, so I just do light taps around. I don't want it to fill the eyes. I still want the dark black in the eyes. I just want the dot to be filled and the edges of the eye to be filled. I then use moot green to fill in the orbs, and I use a very fine brush and I fill in the eyes. The eyes will receive no further green paint and stuff because it's just a little speck. I mean, I can't really highlight a speck. We then continue, as we've always done, to apply the brighter shades of moot green and pallid witch flesh onto the orbs and onto the hoses. There are hoses scattered throughout most of these bodies and stuff, and so the center of the hoses will have the lighter colors, apart from these parts where some of the Necron Warrior hoses are broken open and you can see the inside. Those will also be very bright as well. Alright, in 2 parts milliput to 1 part of the clay, might as well just use a little bit of the filler, we're going to start doing the bases. Now, I recommend like having a plastic bag and stuff to flatten it against a flat table to get it perfectly flat. I mean, it helps. I roll the pin over, and then I remove the excess right afterwards, and I make sure to punch little holes through it for where the feet pegs go through. I do this for quite some time and eventually find that it's a hard thing to plan around, but I did eventually get this down to a science. Alright, so what you do is, after placing the stuff down and getting the dye, you then poke a little hole with it with a stick, and then you put a sander through it to sand through the holes, and then you press in the model. Now, the model pegs on their feet are really useful if you're not using this putty thing. They actually get in the way heavily. Now, since the putty is a little grainy and stuff and I want it to do well, I'm going to coat all the bases with Liquitex matte varnish. Once that is done, I'm going to go and take some Dawnstone, and then I'm going to paint the base for the big guy, the one with the green stuff. I'm going to paint it Dawnstone. And so for the bases and the black stone, I'm just going to give it a Black Templar paint job over it, all over all the bases. Now, thanks to the Liquitex varnish, sealing in, make sure it doesn't ever crack or stuff, it actually makes this, the ground looks very smooth now. So that's pretty good. I then dry brush all the metal rebar, metal beams in the rubble. I dry brush that iron breaker all over. And now with Mephiston Red, Ironbreaker, and Skeleton Horde contrast, I'm going to finish off the little bases. With Mephiston Red, I'm going to coat the entirety of this hand piece and this like back piece of a Mechanicus, I don't know what it's called, but it's one of their machines. It's broken on the ground there. So I'm going to start off with this red color. I didn't get footage, but using Ironbreaker to cover the metal pieces, I will then use Agrax Earthshade to coat both the metal pieces and the armor with it. And now with Rhinox Hide and Mournfang Brown, what we're going to do is we're going to just paint the edges of the bases. All the bases will be Mournfang Brown. However, the second squad of warriors and the second squad of scarabs will receive a basing of Rhinox Hide. And there it is. It's done. Well, that took quite a long time to finish that whole army. It was mostly the Necron Warriors. And also having to look around and order some stuff from Amazon for the bases for good putty and such, so that actually kind of delayed it as well. But after a long time of work, I finally got it done. It took about 2 weeks total, but that's also because I did a palette cleanser and painted 2 feculent Narmals. Surprisingly, they didn't take that much time at all. But, alright, back to the Necrons. So, overall, I'm not gonna rate it yet. There are some interesting things. So, basically, Necrons, they're very simple. They're very different to paint than the Space Marines of the Indomitus set. Because the Space Marines, they're all like characters. And like the bikes and the intercessors, they may be plain armor, but they're very noticeable differences. I mean, one is bikes and one's on foot. So for these guys, for uniformity, like their armor, their bodies, yeah, it looks good. You can see the rust, the age, wear and tear, and the glow. So the glow is good. The basic colors of the armor and the metal, really good. So, but apart from that, I didn't have much inspiration for much else. The guns are basic. There's a lot more detail on the warriors, like wires and stuff everywhere. I couldn't figure what to do with those, so I just left those the colors they were. I wasn't gonna especially paint those uniquely. The bases, okay, so the bases, they look good. They look like broken shards of a Necron Tomb World. If you've played the game 40k Mechanicus, that stuff is everywhere on the ground. And so basically, they're in a tomb world, they're on there, black stone, and so it really looks right. But it was kind of hard to get the milliput and stuff just right. Some of it is a little uneven and stuff. So I would actually add bonus points for the quality of the bases and the uniqueness, but it's something that's a little difficult to get down perfectly right. So overall, the army, I mean, it's a very basic paint job. I mean, they all look the same. I mean, come on. The new Necron models coming out have a lot more flavor and character, but these guys, I mean, they're just an endless horde of automatons. There's not much here. There's not much inspiration. But they look good. They look capable. I think the Scarabs look the best. Alright, so as far as rating, the Scarabs, I'm going to give... I don't do 0.5s, so I'm just going to give it an 8. It could have been a 9, but the bases aren't like up to snuff yet. I still need to work on them to get them better, but they could have been a 9 if the bases. So the Scarabs look really good. They're an 8. The Crypthralls, they're an 8. They were very good, very simple. I really didn't mess up anything on them. That circle thingy, I'm going to give it an 8. Its base is fine. I have no idea what it is. Actually, I didn't look it up. The Royal Warden, honestly, he's a very simple, basic character, and I did well with him. His base is fine. Looks like cracked earth and such. I'm going to give him an 8 as well. The giant camel in the back. Alright, so he looks fine, but his base is a little different than the others. There's not much attention to detail, and I really couldn't think and imagine what to do. I just really couldn't. So I'm going to have to give it a 7 because of the base. That's simply it. Now the warriors. There was a lot more detail on them than I would have expected, and they got in the way on it a bit. I'd have to give myself a straight up 6 out of 10 for the warriors. There's more detail on them that you could do, but infantry are my bane because there's so many and I really hate painting them. This one time I painted 140 guardsmen, and that took me 6 months, and I hated painting for a long time. During and after that, it just drains me. So like these warriors, I hate painting infantry. They're just irritating. But overall, that's it. Alright, the next one is going to be... The next video is going to come out much faster. It's going to be a lot easier because it's just characters, I think. They all have glowing swords. That's what unites them. But the next video is going to come out much faster. I mean, they all kind of look the same. Might be able to do some improvements on the base, and yeah. Alright, like if you like the video, subscribe if you want to see more. The other part of the Indomitus box set's going to come out. And once I finish that, I'm actually going to do a couple battle reports with them because I paint them and I have the army, so I might as well do them. And then I'll sell the models because, well, Lumineth came out. What else? A lot of other things are coming out, and gotta get them. So, my loss could be someone's win. Alright, see you later.